It's 4:20 and I'm told I have to talk into this microphone even though you can all hear me just fine because they're recording it. Now I know what Johnny Carson feels like. Hi, or The Price is Right, even better. These are English shows. Okay, so I'm Steve Snyder and this is my 20 minutes. Instead of talking to you about general topics and the United States as a whole or just legal issues, to talk about what we do at the International Assisted Reproduction Center in Minnesota, and why, even though most of you have never been to Minnesota, and the rest of you never even thought about going to Minnesota, why you should think about going to Minnesota. So, show of hands, how many people have actually been to Minnesota? Raise your hand. 4. Excellent. I'm told I have a Minnesota accent. I don't hear an accent, but you'll have to just, yes, nodding, yes, you do. So, typically when I talk, what happens is I talk so long that at the end, when you have questions, you never get to answer them because I don't have time to answer them. So I'm going to start by saying, what do you guys want to know about? How can I help you with information? You just want me to talk, or do you have questions? Questions? This shows who the extroverts are. No questions? Yes?
Yeah, I'm asking all of them with the whole question around financing and also how do you get that magical number that you're not supposed to.
All right. I think that's a great question and a great place to start, because when you talk about surrogacy, the first thing you think about is, how can it possibly cost so much to have a baby, and how can I afford it? And then you start looking around to find a cost-effective, affordable way to do it. And then you look at the United States, and people say, well, if you go to the United States, it's at least $150,000, and it's often over $200,000. And people say, I can't afford to go to the United States. Yes, it's reliable. Yes, it's got a stable history, but the money is a deterrent. So then you look at other options, and some of those options all come with their own exclusions or their own problems or their own difficulties. I'm here to tell you it doesn't cost $150,000 to do surrogacy in the United States. The reason for that is a variety of things, each of which you can control. So I'm going to talk about how you can keep your costs down when you go to the United States. The first thing you do is you select an agency. When you do surrogacy in the United States, the first choice you make is not a clinic. There's all kinds of doctors here. You might like some of them. But it's an agency, because the agency, if it's a good agency, will then help you select your clinic, because you have priorities, whether it's geography or success rates, or they have a frozen egg bank, or the physician actually calls you back when you call him. We know what the attributes of each clinic are, and we will help you set your priorities and select the clinic that is best for you based on your needs. That clinic selection is going to significantly affect your cost, and the type of program you do at that clinic is going to significantly affect your cost, because you can do a single donor retrieval and a single transfer with frozen transfers, and the fresh transfer has a price, and each frozen transfer has a price. And if you only use one donor, there's a price tag on it. If you need multiple cycles, it costs more. And you can either buy a single cycle or you can buy a guaranteed baby program, which says you pay 3 times more, but we guarantee you have a baby or we give you most of your money back. Now, that could be a $30,000 difference in the cost of your medical process. And if you're using healthy sperm with a woman who's got a healthy uterus with a good pregnancy history, and a donor who's in her early 20s and is extremely fertile, are you likely to need those 3 cycles and pay that $47,000? Probably not. So you need to assess your risk on what you want to purchase and how much you want to spend. But that $30,000 is a swing that you control and you have to decide. After you select your clinic, you're going to have to select a surrogate. The surrogate is going to be someone who, depending on the agency, sets her own fee, and the amount of her fee will affect the cost of your program. Just as I've said in another venue, just as hotel rooms are more expensive in Los Angeles and New York than in Minneapolis, surrogates are more expensive in Los Angeles and New York than in Minneapolis. In Minneapolis, you can probably get a surrogate for $20,000 or slightly less. It may cost $30,000 or slightly more. But on the West Coast, there's an agency that charges $35,000 or more for every surrogate. So how much the fee for your surrogate is will vary it by $10,000 or $15,000. If you're willing to wait to match with a surrogate that is more altruistic than monetary, then you can reduce your cost. In addition, every surrogate comes with a certain insurance situation. The best is if you have a surrogate that has her own insurance that she's paying for, and you can use her insurance subject to the deductible. Meaning in the United States, even if they have good insurance, you pay out of pocket for certain co-pays, like $20 every time you go to the doctor. A deductible, an amount of cash you pay before the insurance starts to cover, which may be as low as $1,000 or as high as $10,000. And an out-of-pocket maximum, which may be the same amount or higher, because not all insurance covers at 100% when the deductible is gone. So the amount of money you're actually paying out of pocket for the medical expenses could vary by $15,000 or $20,000 depending on the type of insurance the surrogate has. That's a choice you make. So already we're talking about a swing of over $50,000 or $60,000 depending on the choices you make. In addition, let's just talk about the agency, and I think this is where IARC shines brightly, because let's say you have an agency that charges you $21,000, and you have another agency that charges you $21,000. It's the same cost, right? No, because in addition to the agency fee, depending on who the agency is and who runs it, you may have additional expenses. So, you hire an agency, they match you with a surrogate, and they say, we have to draft a contract between you and the surrogate. Some agencies, especially if they're not run by attorneys, say that'll cost you $2,500 in addition to the agency fee. Then they say, in order to protect your money, we're going to set up an escrow account for the surrogate's fees, and part of our services is to set up an expense account and process all the surrogate's expense requests through that account for you and send you monthly statements so that you don't have to talk to your surrogate about money issues. You can just focus on having a baby. Most places will charge you $4,000 or more for that service. Some places say, we'll match you with a surrogate. If that surrogate doesn't work out, and that is not uncommon, that you might have to change surrogates. It happens in about 25% of the programs. It takes more than one surrogate to get to success. They will charge you an extra $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 to match you with another surrogate. All of those kinds of add-ons, including the, oh, you're from Germany, we're going to charge you an extra $2,000 because it's more complicated. If you go to IARC, every one of those things is included in that $21,000 fee, including if you get to the end of the whole process and the insurance company that is supposed to cover the pregnancy says, we don't want to, and you have to have someone appeal that and force them to pay, that's also included in your fee. So when you come to IARC, we work very diligently to reduce the amount that you're charged over and above things that nickel and dime you and make it unaffordable to go to the United States. So if you look at the cost sheet that's in the materials on our desk, you will see that we tell you a surrogacy in the U.S., if you make all of those decisions that can vary it by $60,000 or more, you can do it as little as $77,000. If you make every choice and wait, remember, you have to wait for the right person, which means you can't be in a rush. If you say, I want to do it today, you're going to pay $150,000 to $200,000. If you say, I can wait 6 or 8 or 9 months to get exactly the right combination of surrogate and circumstances and insurance and clinic, you can do it for $77,000 to $147,000. So there's about a $70,000 swing there for all of the reasons that I talked about. But what we do is every time you make a decision, we say, this is how it's going to affect your cost. Here's your budget. You've just plugged in a number. This is what it's going to cost. So as you go along, the cost of your program is under your control, and we're making the choices that fit within your budget. Does that make sense? So the first choice you make as an agency, and all of the things, I was really, really impressed with Ron's summary of questions to ask a surrogacy agency, because I have the right answers to every one of those questions. So all of those questions you ask, I go, yep, yep, yep. There was only one question that he asked, or didn't ask, that I think you need to ask. And in the United States, it's important that you know there are no laws that regulate surrogacy agencies or the people who run them. In the history of surrogacy in the United States, there have been 3 or 4 incidents where agencies have gone out of business in the middle of doing programs or stolen the money and run to Mexico. You have to be cautious, and you have to pick someone that you have a long history to look at, really strong referrals, and a high ethical standard. So, IARC's been in business since the early 1980s. I'm the 3rd director. The good thing is that when you work with an agency that's run by an attorney, the attorney has a whole set of ethical rules that attorneys in the United States have to abide by. They can't enter into conflicts of interest, they can't misappropriate funds, they can't commingle money, and if they do, they lose their license. So there's a huge incentive for an attorney to work at the highest ethical level. In addition to that, every attorney should have malpractice insurance, meaning if you make a mistake that harms your client economically, your malpractice carrier pays them so that they aren't harmed. Not every state in the United States requires attorneys to have malpractice insurance. Not every attorney that runs an agency necessarily has malpractice insurance. So this insurance aspect is the one part that Ron didn't mention, and it starts with whether you have an attorney that runs the agency and whether they have malpractice insurance to protect you against harm. In addition to that, if they own a, thanks AJ. In addition to that, if they operate an agency separately, which is what I do, I have my law firm over here, that works with intended parents that aren't going through the agency, that find their own surrogates and just need contracts and stuff. Then I have a separate agency, and the agency should have a separate professional liability insurance policy because the malpractice insurance for the law firm does not cover the agency. And that should be in place to protect you against the negligence or the malfeasance of the agency. And thirdly, because there have been cases where agencies have just taken the money and run, every agency should have a criminal bond. In other words, a bonding company should have reviewed their internal monetary processes, made sure they're reliable and they have double checks in them so that nobody in the agency can steal money. And if they do, the criminal bond should pay your money back. If you do all 3 of those things, in addition to working with an agency that escrows your money for the fee of your surrogate and the big chunk that you put out there waiting for the baby with a third-party escrow company that they don't control, then you have your assets protected and separated from the agency so that you're safe. All of those things, in addition to the list that Ron had, are the things you should ask. I encourage you to stop at the table and ask me the whole list of questions that Ron had, and I guarantee you I'll give you all the right answers. All right? Thank you very much. How'd I do, AJ? Perfect.